operations is government side. And then business continuity is exactly what it said, it's business side. They cover very similar things, but how they do it is a little bit different. And what mandates are required to do that. So very quickly, to start off, is what is and what is not COOP. What do you do and how do you deal with it? Well, first of all, COOP is, it's a planning for disruptors and disasters. Now, the biggest thing that I cannot stress enough with this is not the big 7.0 earthquake. Okay? Now, as far as I work for the Division of Emergency Management, we are the ones that were responsible for the Great Utah Shakeout earlier this year. We are the ones that will be responsible for the big shakeout next year. Yes, we're doing it again. Okay? We're running those tests. But from a business standpoint, and I want you to understand that that's where we're going to be focusing our energy today as far as with my presentation, is I want you to think of your offices now as businesses. You're no longer company, you're no longer government agencies, you're a business. Right? You have business that gets done for the citizenry, yes. But as far as day-to-day operationally, you work and function just like any other business. You just have more people to account to than stockholders. So understand that this is planning for disruptors and disasters. And by disruptors, I mean those little things that come up day to day that you're like, oh crap, now what do we do? Okay? It doesn't have to be a very large thing. How many of you have had a standpipe break in one of your buildings? We'll try that again. This way. How many of you have a standpipe? I'm fighting the mic there. Okay, we'll try this one. Okay, you've had a standpipe break in the basement of your building, and you've had to call in whatever particular cleanup company, Utah Disaster Cleanup, ServPro, any of those, and now you're trying to get the building to stop smelling like the sewer line outside, and it's taking about 6 to 8 hours. Excuse me, meanwhile you're trying to run day-to-day operations. Anybody have that happen? So, my first week on the job, I went out to Tooele County for a set of meetings, getting ready for their big exercise that they have every September. And the emergency manager's office was underneath the county jail. Excuse me, please. And we go walking into the meeting, and there's all sorts of cleanup equipment. And we're like, what's going on? Well, the kitchen is right above the emergency manager's office and the pipe burst. And so the entire contents of the, the food processor, the incinerator, food grinder, what have you. I'm trying to remember the name of the disposal. Thank you, disposal. Having my elderly moment. Don't know what tickle I brought today, but apparently I did. So the disposal broke, and so all of the contents of that pipe, and all the food the inmates have been grinding up, sending down, ended up in her office. And that was on a holiday weekend, and so needless to say, it was a little bit of a smell. It looked really bad and smelled even worse. But operationally, she had less than a week to get the rest of her stuff put together for her operation that was coming up. And so we still conducted business. We just had to go down the hall. But everything else had to be worked on. All the files had to be cleaned up. They lost about 4 or 5 desks. They lost 3 computers. And needless to say, quite a bit of money in all of this cleanup. So understand that we're looking at small things, not big, large-scale disasters. Now, obviously, will that come into play if it becomes that big? Yes. But we're looking at the small disruptors, not the large ones. It is a guide for your response. It's how your office is going to work, how they're going to operate, and what they're going to do in the event of a disaster, okay? Or a small disruptor. Finally, it's triage for your office. I cannot stress this one enough, and understand how I say this. I am the world's biggest capitalist pig there is on the planet. I freely admit it, capitalism works. It works very, very well. And if I can pit company A against company B, God bless America, that's what we're allowed to do. If I get this one to give it to me for $1 cheaper than this one, I'm going to fight until I can get this one to go $1 cheaper than this one. When I talk triage for your office, again, remember, we are talking business-wise. How many of your staff are absolutely vitally essential when you only need 2 people? Then why would you have them in the office, especially during a disaster? It's triage, meaning you're going to bring in who you really need to have there. Everybody else is going to stay home, get them out of your hair, get them out of the way. It doesn't mean that they're not useful as a human being. It just means that they are not essential to what is operationally happening right now. I'm one of them, I'll tell you right now. 4 weeks ago, our office staff, we got kicked out of our offices because they were remodeling. What did they tell us to do? Leave and don't come back for 3 weeks. Now, we telecommuted, for most of us, and me, thankfully, I travel quite a bit with my job, so I don't need to be in the office, but day-to-day operationally, they kicked all of us out. I didn't need to be there. I didn't need to function. And so that's what you're going to be looking at as far as your triage. Okay? When something does happen, who really does need to be here and who doesn't, and you need to make sure that you stick to that. Now, what COOP is not, and that's just as important as knowing what it is first of all, it's not a response to the public. We're not talking about a large-scale disaster, the 7.0 earthquake, and dealing with what's going on outside the doors. COOP is, how do I get Johnny, Janie, and Billy back in their chair operating our office? Okay? Forget anything else that's going on outside that window. It's what does it take to get this building and the personnel up and running no matter what the disaster is. Okay? It's not a plan for everything that possibly can go wrong. Sorry, there's just no way you're going to be able to do that. Okay? You can plan for some pretty good contingencies. You can plan for some things that have a likelihood of happening. But sorry, you're never going to be able to plan for everything that can go wrong. So don't. Just have a good general plan, and that will help you walk through. Then finally, and this is the biggest uphill battle that I have more than anything else, especially on the business side, is continuity of operations is not a waste of time or money. The money and time you invest now in the front end will save you on the back end. Think about it from this standpoint. You know exactly what you're going to do when that standpipe breaks. Instead of you spending 25 minutes trying to figure out, going through the yellow pages, which plumber you're going to call, you already have the plumber on speed dial and ready to go. That 20 minutes has just saved you $30,000 in water damage to your building. It's worth the time and the effort and the energy. It may not look like it because you're looking at stuff that may or may not happen. That's the biggest uphill battle we have in emergency management. Right? Is we talk about disasters, and we talk about them frequently, all the time, and how many large-scale disasters do we have happen in Utah? Very few. Wildland fires is our biggest challenge. We have those almost every single summer. This year was especially bad, but we don't deal with large wholesale disasters like they do on the coast. Florida, every single year, has to prep for some kind of hurricane. Every single year, whether they get hit or not. There's one that on the first few weeks when they're looking at the data, yep, this one's coming to Florida. And so they plan accordingly. Okay, so some things about the COOP itself is, first of all, we want to take a look at your essential functions. And again, I'll get into more detail, but we just want to talk some basics of COOP. You're going to look at your essential functions, things that happen in your offices. Next, we're going to talk about orders of succession. Who's in charge? Okay. And how does that look and how does it work? We're not talking just simply continuity in government. Okay? We know if the president is killed, the vice president is killed. If the vice president is incapacitated anyway, it becomes the Speaker of the House. Okay? So we know that order. Well, same thing here. We also want to delegate authority. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that we look through that. Yeah, we're looking at office staff at this point. Okay? We're not looking at county commission. We're not looking at mayors. We're looking at the office staff. Okay? In my office, we have a deputy director. Some of you may or may not know him. His name is Chris Hamlin. Well, he's in charge day to day. Well, what happens if Chris is not? Who's next in command? Well, we need to know that. Right? But also your delegation of authority is, do they have the right to spend money? Right? Again, let's go back to that pipe breaking. It's leaking. It's going to cause you $30,000 worth of damage if you get to it too slow. Do you want to spend 10 minutes waiting for somebody to get the approval to call the plumber, or do you want somebody to call the plumber right now? Well, they're going to hesitate if they don't have the authority to do it. And so we want to make sure that we put those plans in place prior to. Okay? We want to talk about continuity facilities. Where are you going after a disaster? And I'm, again, not talking the big 7-0. I'm talking about a minor disaster that puts you out of your building for a while. Okay? Your communications lines. How many of you have had phone lines go down before? Okay? It's fun to be able to do all of your work through this, right? No, it's not fun at all. Next, vital records. I'm not talking just the records that go out to the public. I'm talking about the records that you keep internally to keep track of all of those records. You keep track of your personnel, keep track of hours, keep track of whatever types of materials you have going through. Right? Understand that that's all there as well. Human capital. Yes, again, like I said, I'm the biggest capitalist pig on the planet, but I also understand very, very importantly, you cannot do your jobs without your people. Managing your human capital and what they can and cannot do for you is vitally important. Right? You want to make sure that you bring them in and that they can do a great job. Okay? You need to test this. You need to train on it. You need to exercise on it. Again, I'll give you some great examples here a little bit about all of that. Finally, we need to talk about devolution. Devolution is, okay, we had to move somewhere else. Now how do we get back into the building that we used to live in every day? Right? There might be some challenges coming back or getting some things transferred over. And then finally, reconstitution, getting things back to operation. So, first of all is your essential functions. What does that look like? It's your vital services. What do you do on a day-to-day basis that the general public needs from you? Okay, what do they come to your office for? Okay? And this is where we talk a little bit about the triage, what is really needed and what isn't. And one of the first classes I did on COOP, I was sitting with a lady from Department of Records for the state of Utah, and we were just kind of chit-chatting, and me being the one thing that also you don't understand, or it's not on my file, that you need to really understand about me, and Kyle can attest, I'm the world's biggest smart aleck on the planet. So I tend to put my foot in my mouth pretty regular basis. So I'm sitting there with this woman from Department of Records, and we're just sitting, simply chit-chatting on one of the exercises over continuity of operations. And I says, why do we really need vital records? I mean, if you have a big scale disaster, forget it. She says, okay, so your wife dies. How are you making your insurance claim? I'll just call my insurance agent. Yeah, they're going to request a what? Probably a death certificate. Oh, where are you going to go get that? Oh, now including it. Okay? So think about that. What are those things that absolutely, positively have to be done in your jurisdictions? And what can you let slide? Okay? Now, it's October. Okay, it's October 3rd. We're just shy of a little over a month away from the general election. And we have a nice little minor disaster in one of your buildings. And voter registration. Is that vitally important at this point? Yeah, it's absolutely vital. It's one of those things that no matter what, it's got to get done. Whether you want to or not. On a day-to-day basis, what is its priority compared to your emergency personnel running to a fire? Oh, I guarantee it's down here. But as we get closer, I would almost guarantee it almost matches. Okay, so those are the things that you need to look at as far as for your vital services. What can you and what can you not let the public have and go without? Can you let anything slide? Okay, and that's a discussion that you need to have with your senior managers. Okay. Next, you need to be able to exercise your civil authority. This is what will and this is what will not happen as a result of what's going on out here. Okay? Next, maintain the safety of the general public. Okay? We're not trying to push them away. We're not trying to push them aside. We are simply telling them, you know what, we're going to be delayed for a couple days, a couple hours. You may need to wait a little bit of time. And then what provisions do you have to help things out? What provisions do you have in your charters to say, all right, because we went down, it's our fault, we can let these things slide. But do you have any legal basis to let those things slide? Yes, you're going to need to bring in your attorneys and let them help you decide those types of information. Okay, again, like I said, I'm a huge capitalist. Okay? How do we maintain industry and economic base during an emergency? Now, this is going towards a larger scale where it's affecting a large part of the community, a flood, an earthquake, a fire that kind of gets out of hand. Well, you still need that base. Now, there's two reasons for it, and like I say, I work emergency management, but being the smart aleck that I am, I look at it from a different standpoint. If I can keep our general citizens busy and working, they have a goal. They have something to do. Okay? We have a 7.0 earthquake along the Wasatch Fault. Lots of people are hurt, lots of people are injured, but you've got a bulk of the population that are sitting on their thumbs at home on their front lawn trying to figure out what to do. Why aren't they going to work? Well, maybe the office is not up and running. But the sooner that I can get those offices up and running, that gives the citizens a couple of things to do. Number one, even though their house might be destroyed and they're really beside themselves, what are we going to do? They at least have a way to fix that. If I go to work, I know that I can keep working, and yes, my house is destroyed, but I'm making money to be able to try and fix this and get this thing back up and running. But if I'm sitting at home, staring at the wall and looking at and groveling to myself, going, oh crap, woe is me, then I start looking at the property line and I start getting in that argument with the next door neighbor that really I wouldn't have given a crap about 3 days ago, but because I have nothing but time on my hands, now I'm going to be a pain in the butt, and now your vital services for your community are going to be needed in the fact that you're going to need your law enforcement officers out there stopping fights, when they really should be trying to direct people and get them back on their feet. Okay, so if you can get your industrial and your economic base going through an emergency and get them back up and running, it's going to benefit you. Next, monetarily it benefits you because you're bringing in your tax dollars. You're able to operationally run. Okay? And so it's that important as far as from a community standpoint that we get the companies back up and running as quickly as possible. Okay, so now orders of succession. Okay, first of all, they're not merely continuity function. They should be developed to support a day-to-day operation. Okay? You guys are all here, so that means that who's in charge back at the office? Your frontline troops, right? And they can all just make, if you've got a pipe breaking back there, they can make the decision without you. You've got your cell phone, now they can call and verify and check. Yeah, sometimes cell phones don't work, or what happens if the lines in the building are broken and they can't get through. That's why we have this as a day-to-day operationally set up item as well. In my office, we are very clear on that. We know who the lines of authority are. We know who has succession. Right? We know who can and cannot make decisions and what they can and cannot spend in emergency and otherwise. Okay? Like I said, I come from the private sector. I work for a very large financial organization. And I'll let you know on that side, we had on site what was called the Regional Operations Director or General Manager. Excuse me, General Manager. Okay? Now, we say the General Manager, and I'm talking for a very large firm, literally billions of dollars in profits every year. Okay? The Center Manager was a Senior Vice President level. Here's the CEO of the company, here's the Senior VPs, that's how close they were. They're in charge of people that are, there's usually anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 employees per center, right? And this is the person that's in charge. So they leave to go to Chicago for work, for whatever meetings. That puts the second in command as what's called the Regional Operations Director. The Regional Operations Director would very atypically go with the center manager to those same meetings because the Regional Operations Director is second in command. Okay, so we've got those two out of town, they're in Chicago, and something goes wrong while we're here in Utah. Now what? Our company looked at that very, very closely. Now, on a day-to-day basis, the center manager had signing authority of $500,000 a day, as far as he could, as far as whatever invoice he could sign off, and it went, no problem. Went through the accounting process, everything signed, everything went. Regional Operations Director had $100,000. Now, when a disaster hit, though, we looked at it and said, okay, these two are gone. Who's next in line? Which was a department manager, and the department manager just had $5,000 signing authority. Like, oh crap, what are we going to do? So what we did is we put it in place with our company and our organization in the charters and said, if it's a nationally declared disaster, and that's very clear, so it says that it has come from the governor's office, said, okay, here's what you've got. And so the signing authority became $1 million for all three individuals. Now, why on earth would we put $1 million to these three people when I only give them $500,000 or $100,000 on a day-to-day basis? We want them to get the thing fixed. We want it fixed yesterday. Okay? And so we went 3 deep with it, and that's something you may want to take a look at for your orders of succession. Okay? And so that's where it takes us. We want 3 deep. State judge physically, and then you also want to take a look at facilities that may not be on site. We'll talk about that in just a half a second. Okay, delegation of authority. Okay? These are the formal documents specifying who gets to do what, and who's authorized in the absence of the key or other head officials. Okay? Again, this goes back to, yes, money, but don't forget about your elected duties. Is that something that you can pass off, or is that something that you need to have somebody come in and do for you? Do you have the signature authority? Can you sign it off to somebody else, or is that something that must remain with your particular position? That's everything that we need to look at as far as on delegation of authority. Make sure that you understand we need to look at all contingencies. Again, we'll talk hazards in just a few minutes. Okay? Remember that we want to make sure that the delegation of authority, that the delegates can continue to operate and get the essential functions going. Okay? We've got the election board, okay? The city recorder or the county election commissioner, whichever position you have there. Are they able to pass that on, or is that something that strictly has to stick with them? What if they're incapacitated 2 days before the election? Who takes over? Who has that legal authority? Who has that right? Next, emergency operations. As far as my office, like I say, we deal with the emergencies all the time. One of the big challenges that we have is, like any other state agency, is we have a whole lot of paperwork to go through as far as when we're dealing with day-to-day operations. If I want to order a pencil, you cannot believe how much paperwork. Now wait, you work for the government. You know how much paperwork I have to go through to order that pencil. Okay? But understand that one thing that was very nice that we did is we brought in some of our purchasing people, and they were talking to our staff, and we were talking about emergency plans, and they looked and said, we already have these things in place. So again, talk with your accounting staff, talk with your finance people, understand that it may already be in your charters that this is already there, it's already implemented, that you can go ahead and buy stuff without having to go through all the pre-approvals, that you can do it on an emergency basis. Prime example is, again, going back to the state prison. Apparently they have some of the same similar things that they had out in Tooele County. And I was talking to one of the purchasing agencies, says no, they don't need to go through all the rigmarole. They just call whatever particular company close by that can respond in 5 minutes and bring them out. The only challenge the prison has is they have to obviously run the security sweep on the individual coming into the building. Okay, but understand that they don't have to sit there and do a bid process. They don't have to put a call out. They don't have to do a pre-approval because it's an emergency situation. So that just go ahead and contact the closest vendor. Okay, continuity facilities. Now, this is, again, I want you to understand, it can be just simply a relocation within the same building, but it can also be you need to move. Okay? If you have to move because of whatever's happened, what we want you to do is we want you far enough from your primary facility that it's not affecting your backup facility. Okay? Prime example of this is you've got a main electrical line coming into your building, and a road crew is out there working, and they've done due diligence. They've called Blue Stakes, said, hey, where are the lines? Well, if you don't know this, they'll go through and they'll make a mark. But what happens every now and then is the line gets drawn, but what they don't see is that they're assuming in certain spaces that it goes in a straight line. But what happened when the line was really laid is when they put the dirt down, it actually pushed the line to the left or to the right 3 feet. Well, they're marking here, and then they come across that bend, and then they mark here. Right? So that crew is following the line like they're supposed to, but that electrical line curved when we buried it. So the backhoe operator clips the line. He did not mean to do it. They've done all their due diligence, and now they put the line, and you have no electricity in your operations center, okay, in your facility. So now you put your backup facility right next door. Well, it's on the same main line, so you're out of electricity there. So that's what you need to look at as far as if you need to move facilities, can you do it someplace other than nearby? One of the things I need you to do is to think way, way, way out of the box on this. Remember, this is a temporary setup. You're able to still operate, you're still able to do your jobs, but you're doing it at a different location. Okay? Some things to think out about: warehouses. Unfortunately, with the economy the way that it is, there are quite a few abandoned warehouses. Well, can you set up operations there temporarily? Okay? Schools. Okay? School might be in session. It may not be quite so crowded. Can you do it in a corner of the gym? Can you do it in a corner of the cafeteria? Do they have 1 or 2 classrooms that are available? Okay? Something to that effect. A library. Okay? Can you move your operations there? Again, we're talking, these are already owned, government-owned facilities that you might be able to make an agreement with and house your people there. Okay? Yeah. Push comes to shove, put them in a trailer. Okay? There are some available. You can bring in emergency command posts. Okay? One of my favorite examples of continuity facilities is how many of you have dispatch centers in your main buildings. If that dispatch center goes down, now what do? You call my office. We have one on wheels. Okay? We have communications vans free of charge to anybody in the state. Call us up, and barring travel time, once it's on site, 15 minutes, your communication center is hot. Okay? We have seating for 6 dispatchers. We're in the process of building a new one that should be able to hold 8 to 10. Okay? But the whole idea is that we have a backup for it. You can bring it out, you can use it to run your operations that way as far as that type of facility. Okay? So look for those things out there. Do you have an emergency operations van? That's a mobile office. Okay? Okay? Mobile command post is a mobile office. Well, in an emergency, bring it in. Talk to your emergency managers. Talk to the county emergency managers. Say, hey, can you bring it in? All else fails, again, call us. The state agency, we have a really nice one. It's huge. Right? And we have plenty of desk space. We have plenty of computing power. We bring that all on site. Again, it's free of charge. All you have to do is call us and ask us for your help, or ask us for our help, and we're more than happy to do that. Okay. Next, remember, this is a temporary setup. It may be temporary for 30 days. Okay? It might take a bit of time for you to get your building back up and running. Okay? But what we want to make sure that we do is we keep a skeleton crew, like I said earlier, and only those essential functions are working. Dog licenses, you may need to put some kind of temporary sidebar on issuing dog licenses for a while. You know what? Bring FIDO stuff in 35 days from now, we'll let you pass. We'll let you slide. Okay? Continuity communications. I cannot tell you how often this one happens more than anything. First of all, your communications need to be redundant. You need to have some kind of backup system. Now, how does that look? That's entirely up to you and your organization. For my office, okay, first of all, we have our regular phone lines. They come in, we utilize those. If those go down, then yes, we do rely on the cell phone. What happens if the cell phone goes down? Then we have backup radios. And we've all gone through some training on how to use them, and we work on the 800 and the UH and VHF frequencies. So we can manage and we can operate if absolutely necessary. Hate to do the whole radio thing because it'd be it's kind of a pain. It's a little bit of a large issue, but it's there. So we can talk to each other. What about your office phones? Have you talked to your providers, your local telecommunications company? The local entity up in Salt Lake is typically ClearLink, CenturyLink, I apologize. CenturyLink, and they actually have a system in place where if your lines are cut off, they can at least put a message on your line that says their phones are temporarily down, please contact this number. Or we could say they're temporarily down, please contact us in this many hours. Can you let your operations do that? Or do you need to have them contact somebody? Well then, can you reroute them to another area? Okay, routing a phone line is actually pretty easy. You just have to be able to do it. You have to have that stuff in advance and in place in advance. Cost to that, you have to talk to your individual companies, but a lot of times it's not that big of an expense anymore. It used to be a very heavy expense in order to reroute points. But nowadays, it's pretty minimal. Next, how fast can you use those communication settings? Okay? As far as available within 12 hours, okay? Or can you get them there sooner? Do you have to wait later? Okay? And what do they look like? Do you have enough radios for everybody in the office to use them? Can the people can your customers get a hold of you via radio? Okay? And in my case, with what I do for day-to-day operations in emergency management, yes, because county and city emergency managers, they are all on radios, whereas general public, they aren't. Okay? So they would have to go through some other areas. So what can you do to get that back up and running as soon as possible? And can you sustain that for 30 days or until your normal operations come back up? Now again, we're looking at deep, longer term types of things. Let's talk about a fire in a building. Yeah, it's going to be gunning out some of the prime equipment, maybe losing some records, and we'll talk vital records in a few minutes here. But understand that we're looking at all of that to make sure that everything is going with want. But can we run on those systems for that long? Okay? I can't run my day-to-day business as far as operationally. This is only a temporary fix. I could not run day-to-day with this thing going off. I'd end up chucking it in the nearest van by the river. Vital records. Okay? Every agency has the documents and the files. I can't stress this enough. Remember, this is not the public records. This is your internal records to verify all that stuff. Okay? Payroll, hours kept, okay? Sick time, all that information that goes through your employees, then all the supporting documentation that goes with your vital records, okay? Whatever they happen to be. First of all, your emergency operating records. They're required for your agency functions. Okay? They are absolutely mandatory to have them. Well, you need to make sure that you have them, you keep them on hand, and you work with them as much as humanly possible. Next, rights and interest records. Again, can you legally tell people, you know what, that grandma request, yes, on a day-to-day basis, we normally take that, but because of what's happening, you're going to have to wait on your grandma request 45 days from now. But can you do that legally? Again, talk to your city and county attorneys to make sure that you have that in place. It's something very easy. You can write that in, but you have to have it done prior and publish it out to the general public. Okay, human capital. Okay? Remember that you've got people, first of all, you need to designate an emergency response group. One of the biggest challenges that companies face, and you will operationally deal with, if you haven't seen a disaster, is you get people that show up that don't need to be here. Okay? In a large-scale disaster, we deal with what we call SRUV, S-R-U-V, self-responding, untrained volunteer. It's people who have no skill set. Okay? They just saw a disaster happen and they really want to help. We love the fact that they're wanting to help. But in some cases, they can be a hazard unto themselves, because I watched CSI, or I've seen a firefighter show, and I could go into that burning building. Oh crap, get out before I have to throw you out. Okay? One of my favorite stories is with the collapse of the canal up in Logan. We had lots of people coming in to do the bucket brigade, and they got turned away at the door. Yes, we were very happy about their presence there. We were very happy that they wanted to help. But the problem with that is, when you're digging on a pile like that, looking for bodies, it has to be done in a very meticulous and orderly way. So we sent them away. The only people that were allowed on the dig were trained rescue crews. And they were there for 15 minutes, and then they were kicked out. The reason being is, it was a hazard. They were digging, they were pulling, they were huffing and puffing. What we did with volunteers is we had them bring in water. As soon as the firefighters came off the pile out of the hot zone, they were in a tent and they were getting hosed down with water. Everything they could do to get their bodies cooled back down. They really appreciated that. But as far as on the pile itself, no, nobody was digging on there that shouldn't or that shouldn't have been in there. Right? So let's think about the same thing. Next, communications to your employees. Make sure that they understand what's going on. And this is a preset. Okay? What we want to let our people know is, okay, in a disaster, if something happens, here's what's going to happen in the office. Billy, Janie, Susie, we love you. You are wonderful human beings, but we don't need you to come to the office in this setting. Stay at home. We'll call you when we're ready for you. And yes, at times you will have to put security personnel in front and say, no, you have to stay out. I realize that it's their livelihood. I realize that it is important to them. I work in an office setting. The people that I work with are great. And yes, I have some very good relationships. But there are times when I don't need to be there, and so get out. You may need to provide guidance to your employees. Let them know what's going on. Give them all the updates that they're not seeing on the press. Tell them all the down and dirty details. Okay? But remember that, hey, this is what our real focus is on. You're going to have people that, oh, this is my job and this is where I go. Yes, day to day, this is the direction you go. You go to the east. Well, no, today we're all going west. And now it's the herding cats. No, stop trying to go east. Keep going west. Figure out the best way to use your personnel. Okay? You have skill sets. Remember, it's not what they do on a day-to-day basis that you need. It's what skills do they have that you need during the emergency. Okay? One of my favorite examples of this is a previous boss when I was at my private firm. I had a manager that trying to be very nice and very polite about this, but she was not the sharpest tool in the shed when it came to day-to-day operations. Managing budgets, managing personnel wasn't really her forte. But you put a disaster, any type of fire going on in the building, okay, meaning we had an issue with this person, we have an issue in this department, there was nobody you wanted better. She had a very cool, level, and conditioned head when it came to disasters. You had an employee that was stealing. Everybody else was losing their mind. She was dead on. Okay, these are the questions we're going to ask, and we're going to figure out what they're doing. That's what you need to take a look at. Look at your personnel for the skills that they have, not what they do operationally day to day. Test and train it. Okay? Bring your people in and try things out. See what you can do. Okay? First of all, you have to train your people to know what to do. They won't join you in the run unless you show them where they're going to run. So go through, share with what you expect of them in a disaster. Okay? It also gives them an opportunity to learn some new skills. Yes, this is one of those things where Bill does the same thing, has been doing it for 25 years, is absolutely the expert. What happens if Bill is no longer alive? Who picks up the ball and runs with it? So you need to cross-train your people. They need to understand that no, I'm not trying to replace you. You need to let go of the grip, and you need to let people help you out. The best thing you can do is have a staff that knows everybody else's job. It does build team unity. I guarantee you, Bob, who's been doing it for 25 years, is going to push back very, very hard. You can't do this to me. I've been doing this for 25 years. Nobody can do this better than me. Yes, we agree. But we need everybody to know how to do it in case you're not around. What happens when Bob goes on vacation? Oh, well, we just set it on his desk and let it sit there for 3 weeks. Well, that can't happen. Devolution. Right? It's an extension of your agency, your operations, and your continuity plan. Make sure that if the continuity personnel are unable to perform the mission, somebody else can step up and do it. Okay? County commissioners are all gone. They're either away or they're incapacitated in some. What's the next step? Who can take over? Who can manage the operation? And don't look at even the large scale. What can we do as far as on in an office staff? Example of this is I work at the state office building, which is the big 50s looking thing right behind the Capitol. Okay. That building is a little bit old and a little bit dated. And so just that building is affected. So the building gets water damage coming off of the 6th floor and it's starting to spill down to the floors below. Who has the authority to say, okay, anybody who works at the state office building, you can go home for the day? That has to come from each one of the department heads or the commissioners before anybody can go. There are 5 different offices in there. Right? My commissioner works over on Redwood Road. The other 4 work in 4 other different areas as well. So there isn't even anybody on site that can give that approval. Now again, same type of scenario. I've only got one office that's affected by this. Their commissioner's gone, whatever vacation or are unable to be reached. What's the next step? Second in command able to make that call that yes, all these staff, this entire staff will go home? Or do they need to do the other way and go to the lieutenant or the governor himself to get that authorization? Again, that's what you want to take a look at with your devolution. Who has the ability to perform the missions that are needed? If your continuity facility is unavailable, now where do you go? Okay. Do you have the ability and the authority to move people to another location? Do you have the money to do so? Okay. The reconstitution operations. Okay. And 3 tasks that you're seeing here. First of all, a transition from continuity status to normal operations. You've been operating out of a trailer for 3 weeks, and everybody knows to go to the trailer. Now we need to go back to the office because it's been cleaned up, it's ready to go. Now what do we do? Right? And how does that happen? How do we make that transition quick and easy and painless? Right? Coordinating and planning options for the reconstitution regardless of the level of disruption. Is the building completely leveled and now it's rebuilt, we're ready to go? Okay, again, how do we move all of that information? Remember, you're going to have piles of information that will stay in the new building while you're waiting for the old one to be repaired. Now we got to transfer everything over back to the old building. Okay, and then finally, outlining procedures to get and restore the new facility. Some other things you need to take a look at are your support functions. Okay? Your program plans, your procedures, risk management. You've seen that you've been discussing that for a couple days here, and understand that you look at that on a day-to-day basis. Well, what are your real risks? What can really happen? Okay? You're budgeting your acquisition of resources. What do you and what don't you have? Okay? And then what are your operational phases and implementation procedures? Okay? First of all, your program plans and your procedures, okay? They lay out how the plans will be developed and in a time frame. As far as continuity of operations, right now the governor has made it mandatory that all divisions, all departments have their continuity of operation plans in place by December 1. Okay, now that's the division level, the department level. So Department of Public Safety, Department of Health, all those have to have their plans in. Then the resulting divisions below, they have to have theirs by July 1st. Okay, so again, we're in kind of a cycle. Each one operates a little bit independently. Well, we need to have those plans and have them put into place, make sure that they're in place. We know the time frame to do it. Also, your pre-planning is to make sure that it's done on an orderly manner, on time, and within budget. Yeah, this is not wholesale spending. We're going to go out and buy 57 trailers. We're going to spend all sorts of money. No, it's a plan, and this is how it's going to look. Okay? Like I said, it is not a waste of time. It's not a waste of money. And if we plan appropriately, we can make sure that it's limited that way. Finally, ultimately, the plan needs to address all elements of viability of the continuity plan. So your risk management, hazard analysis. What we want to take a look at is what are the effects, what really can happen to your buildings. How many of you are worried about a terroristic event in your facility? Okay. We live in Utah. I love my state. I've lived here my entire life. Okay. Except the Olympics, the likelihood of terrorists coming and bombing any place in the state of Utah is pretty minimal. Right? The reason being is, number one, if you travel outside the state of Utah, you travel outside the United States, you tell them for Utah, what is the very first question that they ask you? What state is Utah in? I've done extensive research on this one. What state is Utah in? Well, we're our own state. Oh, really? Where is it? You know where California is? Yeah, we're 2 states to the east. Still don't know what you're talking about. We had the Winter Olympics there in 2002. And it's still not ringing a bell. It's where all the Mormons are. Heard of those guys. Right? So understand that, yeah, realistically, terroristic event, probably not high on your hazard list. What about a pandemic? A little bit higher on the list. How about a fire? It doesn't have to be a wholesale fire, take down your entire facility. You ever had just a small garbage can fire? One of my favorite stories out of that is I was working again with my private sector company, and I'm in a cube farm taking phone calls, and the person who's next to me is a smoker. And she's just sitting there on day-to-day operate, on a day-to-day basis, and we're taking phone calls. Well, she's just gotten so kicked back and relaxed one day that she forgot where she was. She lit up. It's a smoke-free facility, but she just kind of sitting there talking on the phone to one of our customers and just having a good old day, and she lit up and then realized what she did. She took the cigarette and threw it in the garbage can. So we had a little mini fire. We pulled the fire extinguisher out and killed it. Right? So needless to say, security came by and said, what the heck's going on? She decided he did something really stupid. Right? But understand, those are the kinds of hazards we need to look at. Right? The other thing, don't look at the large hazards. I want you to look at the small ones. I want that standpipe. Okay? For those of you who don't know what a standpipe is, take a look up. See all the little fire extinguisher thingies? That is a water line. And it is a charged water line. It's full of water right now. Well, it's under pressure. how long do you think a pipe can sit under pressure? How many years before it finally gets metal fatigue and breaks? If you don't know, every day in the state of Utah, there are 3 companies affected by some kind of standpipe break. They get some kind of flooding in their facility. Now, it can be large, it can be small, but understand that the average in the state of Utah is there are 3 places a day that have a standpipe failure. It's just day-to-day operations, folks. Again, it's not anybody causing any problems. It's not somebody trying to make the day worse. It's life. Right? So understand that it can happen. So look at your real vulnerabilities. Now, if your facility is next to a very large hill, and you just recently had a fire, like they did in Saratoga Springs, what is the likelihood of you having a mudslide on the next rainstorm? It's pretty high on the chart. So you may want to look at landslides as one of your things to look at as far as risk management, risk hazards. Okay? But please keep it in the realm of reality. Okay? No zombie apocalypses. Realize zombies are all the rage, but the reality of the zombie apocalypse happening, not really going to happen. Okay? Remember to look at your 3 consequences of not protecting the asset or not performing the essential function. Okay? The other hazard is this. You don't allow people to come in and sign up to be sign up their voter registration card. How soon are you going to be? You're going to be in a world of hurt. So you need to look at those types of things. Because you're not doing your job, what are the consequences? Okay. Next, what is the threat environment as it relates to a specific area of concern? And then finally, your vulnerability. What really is vulnerable? I work for the state of Utah, like I said, and well, one thing that you need to understand is our computer systems. You've heard in the news we've had some hacking, but you also stop that. You also did. Yeah, no, shouldn't be doing that either. Right? One of the things about the state of Utah is we have one server area. That's up at the state capitol. Okay? That's in the state office building. That's where all of our servers are for all the information coming out of the state. We have a backup in Richfield, but it's not as backup as you need it to be. Well, there's a very big vulnerability and a very relevant threat to our records. Lady that I talked to, again, Vital Records, when I was going through my COOP training, the records for the Department of Health, they were in the basement. Well, if you know where the health department is for the state of Utah, it's right next to a lovely little meandering river called the Jordan River, and it never floods. It floods all the time. Right? All the records are in the basement. So somebody looked at that and said that's a threat, and subsequently the records have been moved to a new location. But you need to take a look at that. How many of you store all of your county records or city records in the basement? Okay, water goes up, right? Water goes down. What protections do you have in place? Budgeting, right? Remember, your budget needs to be able to support your people, your communications, and your facility. Okay, you may want to allocate to require the resources. Now, coming from a very large financial organization, again, where profits were in the billions every year, very easy for us to do this as far as to acquire resources. Why? We got the money to do it. Now, mind you, we have shareholders and we have a bottom line to watch out for, just like anybody else. But the thing that we did is, with our facility, we looked at other places where we could run our operations center and said, hey, this would be a good place, this would be a good place, this would be a good place. Now, mind you, that wasn't just, okay, yeah, that looks like a pretty building. No. We looked at the infrastructure and said, okay, do they have enough electricity coming into the building that we're able to run and operate? Do they have enough phone lines coming in that we're able to route them and get enough of our people up and running and working? Right? Well, to require those resources, you're thinking, okay, so that means we have to go spend $1.5 million. Actually, we spent $1,000 to do that. Now, how many of you have about $1,000 in your budget that you can possibly play with? It's a little tight, but you probably got it. Well, here's the deal. We went to a couple of the property management companies and we looked at them and we said, look, this facility, this facility, this facility, you own all three of them. Well, in a large-scale disaster, if our building goes down, we want first access to one of these three. He said, okay, well, we'll give it to you. I said, we're going to pay you $1,000 and we're first in line. So if these three buildings are still standing, we get first choice. He said, okay, no problem. Have the attorneys draw up the lines, put all the information there. Now, what you understand is, yeah, we're paying $1,000 for the right to have the first one in. Then we're going to pay them rent or the lease, what have you, to take care of them. We're not paying them up front for everything else. We're not paying rent on a day-to-day basis for the facility. If it's available. Now, what happens if this one gets rented? Well, then we have option 1 and 2 and 3 fall to next.
You just answered the question. I was going to say, are you going to move anybody out to get you in?
Yeah, and that's the whole point, is that we would look at, we'll take a look at that. So again, do you have facilities? I just gave this as a course to a very small organization the other day. I did the business side of it. And they're located on 21st South and 7th East. Well, if you know the area, if you look just to the south of 21st South, there's a strip mall, and there's 3 buildings that are empty. 3 of the retail shop areas that nobody's using. Well, I asked the people that ran the company, did you run out of one of those? Well, yeah, we could set up 3 or 4 computers. Have you checked with them to see if you could use it? Again, this is that out-of-the-box thinking. Are you looking for a big scale, or do you just need a small desk? Okay? Give my father as an example. My father runs a metal manufacturing company, and he has a total of 23 employees. Okay? Most of them are welders and metal fabricators, the bulk of them. He has 10 people that are office staff. Okay? One of them is my brother, one of them is my uncle, and my dad's partner, and 2 of his brothers. So we've got some family running that. Well, in the event of a disaster, his basic operations for continuity will be his house. They're just going to take all the computer records, move them to the basement of my dad's mom's home, and they'll set up a little mini computer network in the basement and run that one. So that again goes back to thinking out of the box. Now, legally, I don't know if you're able to do that, but if that's the closest, if that's the easiest, and that gets you up and running, that may be something you want to look for. So again, when you're requiring resources, don't look to making the building the exact same way it was before. This is a temporary fix. This is a Band-Aid while you're working to get the other one back up and running. Okay? Engage the resources and implement your plan. Get the people there, get things going. I can't stress this one enough. You need to test. Okay? Wonderful example coming out of Katrina. If you have a chance to listen to him, there's a gentleman by the name of Anthony Topazzi. He was the CEO of Southern Electric when it happened. He relates the story about a very large bank in Mississippi. They looked at the hazard. They said, okay, if we have a hurricane, we could be in a world of hurt. So this is all prior to Katrina coming in and landfall. So they said, okay, we need to get our backup servers and everything. So they sat down, they drew up a plan, and they figured out, okay, distance-wise, Chicago makes the most sense. It's far enough away that we can still transmit our data. It's far enough away that once the hurricane hits landfall, it'll dissipate. Yeah, they'll get rained on, but the facility itself will be up and running, no problem. But yet it's also close enough that the data transfer is not going to take hours on end. We can do it relatively quickly. So they built their backup facility, they put in a bunch of servers, it's in a nondescript location, right? And so all this banking, all the backup for this bank went to this area. So Katrina hits, and now they go through. Well, the one thing that they did not do is a full load test. They tested the servers, and they had this branch and that branch run off of it. They never had anybody go out and quote unquote cut the line and then run off of this set of servers. So when Katrina came in and hit and forced them to run off of all of their servers, they couldn't do it. They didn't have enough bandwidth and they didn't have enough storage capacity to run. And so for the next 2 weeks, they were running very small, very slow, and causing problems and consternation to their customers because they couldn't get all the information, all the records. Why? Because their facility couldn't handle the load that they thought it could. The reason being is they did not full load test. You need to do that. Here in Utah, we have a great example. I leave the company's name out to protect their reputation and name, but very silly. They sat and looked at one of their risk assessments and they said, okay, what really could be a problem for us is losing power. So they went out and they bought a backup generator. And when I say they bought a backup generator, they bought a backup generator. Big cat, diesel, 20,000 kilowatts. They put it up on top of the roof of the building. And $500,000 later, the building's all hooked up. They've got the generator going. And already, this thing will power the entire building, no problem. Every month they would go out, they'd flip the switch, start it up, get it running, make sure that everything's going, make sure that the lube oil filter was done. This machine was working, yep, it's pumping out electricity. And again, they did not do an actual full load test. Well, here comes the day, and yes, the power goes out, they go out, running out, yes, there we go. They flip the switch, and the generator's running, it's kicking out power. Somebody forgot to hook up the line from the generator to the building. They have a $500,000 generator on top of the building that is capable of powering the thing. And they forgot to pay an electrician $1,000 to hook it up to the building so they can generate power through the rest of the building. Those are the things you need to take a look at when you're doing your acquisition. Right? Budget. Okay? Again, make sure that everybody has what they need to function. How many of you have people that are stapler hoarders? You cannot use my stapler. It's a special stapler. Don't even think about looking at my stapler. Okay? You can't share? No. When you've set up your continuity facility, that offsite area, make sure you have all of that stuff. Next, don't forget about the families of the people. I work for the state of Utah. I'm the Division of Emergency Management. Day to day, I train continuity of operations, business continuity planning. But I want you to understand something. We have the big 7-0 right now. Like the rest of you, I'm going to dive under the table. I'm going to wait for the shaking to stop. And once it stops, I'm walking out to get in the car that I drove down here. And I am driving as far north as humanly possible until they stop me. And then I'm getting out of the car and I'm walking the rest of the way. The Emergency Operations Center for the state of Utah is at the state capitol. It's brand new. It's a wonderful facility. If you ever need to take a look at it, come talk to us. We'd love to take you on a tour. It's a great facility. I live in Davis County. I'm going to walk right past that building. I'm going to Davis County. I got 5 people counting on me to take care of them first. They're number one. I promised them that I would take care of them first. Okay? Why is that significant to you? Well, my job is, I'm the logistics coordinator. My job is to start getting all the equipment, the personnel, and the materials into the state of Utah to start taking care of the citizens of the state of Utah. I'm the guy that orders the MREs, the water, the trucks, you name it. I'm the dude that does that. Guess what? I'm taking care of your family first. I'm taking care of mine. I want you to understand that. It's not that I'm trying to be mean. It's not that I'm trying to be rude. It's not that I don't care. But like you, I've made a promise to somebody else, and they come first. They get me first of all. Once they're squared away, then I'll go back to the office and I'll start working. What does that have to do with your families, your support staff? Well, remember, they're going to do the same exact thing. They're not going to come to work and help you out, even though that you really need your operations up and running. They're not going to come help you. They're going to take care of their family. They're going to take care of their own. But what if they can't because they hadn't planned on it? What if they don't have their disaster plans? They're the one that's sitting at their house going, oh, woe is me, causing problems for the police officers to have to come out, rather than coming to your office and getting things squared away. So make sure that they have their stuff secured away, that they're taken care of. Make sure they have a to-go kit, a 72-hour kit. Go to bereadyutah.gov. We have a kit, a list of everything you should have in a 72-hour kit. And if you don't have one, get one. Sorry, little personal twitch. Something that I've been preaching for years. Okay? Make sure that you have an emergency call-in number. Okay? Your facility is affected. How do they get a hold of you to find out if they need to even come in? You need to have those kinds of plans and those backups. Okay? Make sure that you have an office go kit. And that's not just protection stuff. That's not food, water. That's also what do they, if I need to tell you to get out of your building because it's on fire, you have a grab and go kit that has all the information that you need to get a hold of, right, or where to find that information. Next, you need to have a good communication plan to let everybody know what's going on. Okay. They're going to start speculating. A couple other things you need to make sure you let them understand is they don't talk to the press, because that's where all the speculation comes from. How many times have you ever seen that somebody walks up with mics and tell us what's going on? Oh, I was in there. And they don't have the story right. It's because we haven't told them. And we need to make sure we let them know that they don't talk to the press.
One thing that really irritates me about the press, and I've seen this happen in OSHA investigations, especially if it's a fatality, they are willing to interview anybody and their sister that happened to be a mile from the whatever it was, and take whatever they say as truth.
Yep.
And then they will propagate that, and what you hear on the evening news, you're going, wait a minute, I was just at that investigation. That's not the story I'm looking at. So, don't believe what the press says, and try really hard not to give them any bad information, but definitely give good information if you can.
In my next section, I will, as far as my next part of the presentation, I'll talk at length about that so you understand. Okay? A couple other things you need to understand about continuity. There are four phases. Okay? First of all is your readiness and preparedness, your activation and relocation, your continuity of operations, and this runs from 12 to 30 days or until normal operations can happen. Again, we're looking at this as a short-term issue in most cases. Okay? The reason why we talk about 30 days is coming out of hurricanes. This, again, a lot of this comes out of Florida. They figure it'll take them about 30 days to clean up a building enough that you can get back up and operationally run. Right? And that's all that they're really looking at. Does it mean that the office looks wonderful and is immaculate? No. It just means that you can get back into the building and operate. So readiness and preparedness is strictly, and make sure you bring in a planning team and you identify and organize all essential functions. The one thing that I can't stress enough here is that you bring in all the players. Okay? Whoever in your office, whatever department head, whatever manager, you bring in the right appropriate people. Now, this will be a bit of a rigorous meeting. As a manager of people, I am not doing my people any good if I say, no, our staff isn't needed. You're okay, we don't. No, I need to fight for my people. Yeah, we are the most important division you have because X, Y, Z. And you need my entire staff here because of A, B, C. But what happens is that we weed through this. You have a planning team that says, okay, yes, while your group is important, this is the group that is essential. Now, the other thing I want you to understand on that is, remember, we're talking about human capital, we're talking about skills, not what they do operationally. We know that Bill is the best number cruncher on the planet. Well, he normally works in this department. We're shutting down this department temporarily, bringing him over. I'm putting Bill to work because he's the best number cruncher, not because he knows how to run this one today. Okay, so look at those essential functions. Also, this group will organize and develop a continuity plan. Who's doing what, why they're doing it, and when they're doing it. Look at all your resources needed. I'll talk about resources again in my other presentation very, very quickly. but just identify what you really need in order to operate. Yes, desk, chairs, computers, phones, scissors, paper, staplers. You use 2-hole punch on a day-to-day basis without fail. But your 2-hole punch gets broken. You go pick one up at Office Depot. You have the ability to do that. Do they even carry them anymore? Right? Those are the things that you need to take a look at. Right? And then again, test things out. Your occupation relocation. Who has the authority to say it's time to move? I can come in and say, yeah, looking at the building, but that doesn't mean I have the authority to do it. And that's where we talk about that 3D. Who in your office has the authority to say, you know what, this building is a loss, we need to get the heck out of Dodge. Next, we need to locate, alert, and notify everybody. How do we go about doing that? And make sure that all the documentation goes through. And then also we will talk about devolution. What happens if the primary facility is unusable? What happens if your continuity facility is inaccessible? Now, okay, look at 3D. Right? What about your key personnel? If they're incapacitated, where do they go? Who can perform their function after? As far as your continuity operations, okay, don't forget about your procedures. Reception, accepting your customers coming in and out the door. What are your processes, and how do you account for your people? How do you transition from day-to-day operations to your emergency response group, ERG? Right. And remember, when you transfer the ERG group, ERG, they are in charge. Right. Again, I go back to the private sector. Again, that senior VP level, we had an emergency manager on site. She was the one that was in charge. Now, again, I want you to understand the chain of command here. Here is the center manager, senior VP, regional operations director, second in command, department manager, shift manager, team leader. So there's 5 levels between. The emergency manager for our facility was a team leader level, 5 steps below. But when an emergency operations was put into place, that person was in charge. In my case, it was a lady by the name of Jackie Waring. Right? She told the bosses what to do, where to go, when to go, and how to do it. And they followed. Why? She's the one running the show in an emergency. That's who we put in charge. She knows the plan. She knows what needs to be done. So get out of her way and let her do her thing. Same thing here. When we put an emergency response group together, get out of their way, let them do their job, and stop being a pain in their butt. Why? They're saving your bacon. The worst thing you can do is get in their way. Next, what about non-deployed personnel? In other words, the people that need to stay home. What guidance do you give them? No, stay home. Yeah, you're still on the payroll. No, we don't need you. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Okay, we're going to need you next Thursday. Can you come in? What about your replacement personnel? Yes, it might be that you need to bring in outside help. Who are they and what can they do? Don't forget, yes, you can have some memos of understanding or memos of agreement, MOUs and MOAs. Get them in, and maybe you can bring some replacement personnel from other jurisdictions. Remember, this is an emergency. So we're trying to fill the gap with people who know what they're doing. Okay? Make sure that we execute our essential functions at the continuity facility, and we make sure that we activate the process and we sustain our operations. Okay? Finally, we need to make sure we notify our customers, whoever they happen to be. Again, I want you to understand you are now in a business setting, not government. You are dealing with customers. They may be constituents, but they really are your customers' day-to-day operation. Okay? And so, then you also need to put in a plan for getting back to your primary facility. Last 2 things here, and then we'll take a break, is understand the reconstitution is how does the agency restore its primary facility? What does that look like? Again, what level of preparedness does that facility have to be? Okay? Now, like I said, when we did our renovation, for the first 3 days of the renovation, there was no way we could use our facility at all. Right? It was completely burned down, all the phones were gone, all the wiring was ripped out. Right? But on the 4th day, they had all the wiring rerouted. What it was is a reroute, because of the way they were configuring. But we could have plugged in. It would have taken about 6 hours for somebody to put it all together, but we could have jerry-rigged it. We would have been okay. Okay? Finally, procedures needed to document the transfer of information and materials to that site. How do we get everything that we've been working on the off-site facility back to the primary facility? Finally, an after-action report. Now, an after-action report and corrective action report are simply what needed to happen, what went wrong, what can we do better, and how can we make it better. It comes from, like say, with the private sector, when I first heard corrective action process, it just started chills coming up and down my spine. The reason being is that in the corporate world is what you talk about when you're this close to being fired. So whenever they said, okay, we have to talk about corrective action, I would just cringe and go, don't want to talk about it. No, this is, okay, something did go wrong. What can we do to fix it? It's not, yes, it will lay blame at some points. But we're not looking to fire people. What we're looking to do is change processes, to fix things, to make them better in case it happens again. Okay? As far as initiating the continuity planning process, remember we need managers, we need stakeholders, we need representatives to be involved. We need this from the top. They need to see it. Who should be there? Your IT group, obviously. Record keeping nowadays is the lifeblood of everybody. If they're dead, you're dead. Your human resources, yes, what personnel do you need? Okay? Your facilities management people need to be there. They have access to a lot of the stuff that you don't know about. One of my favorite things that I do when I teach this in the business community, if I'm doing it for a private company, I find the CEO and I go, okay, I know who they are, and then I sneaky walk around the building a little bit and find that one little room that has the electrical circuits on it, okay? And I'll walk up and I'll say, okay, class, we need to go for a little tour. And we'll go find that door that says high voltage, don't go in. And I grab the CEO and I say, you're the CEO, right? Yeah. There's nobody more in charge than you? Right. You're the boss? Right. Nobody's more bossier than you? Right. Okay? You can go anywhere in this building you want, right? Right. Get me in this door. And they sit there and they look at their little set of keys. Facilities has that. That's why you need your facilities people. They have access to those areas that even though, yeah, you can, don't. Okay? Procurement and acquisition. How do we get stuff and do we get it signed off and how quickly can we get it? And finally, public information, the release. And again, I'll talk about more in my other section. Don't forget about your legal group. What you can and cannot do, and what you're obligated to do, and what penalties. Banking industry is a great example of this. The banking industry, they are required to remain open within 4 days. That's every single operating day out of the year. It can be closed 3 days. So, Friday, Saturday, and a holiday Monday. Tuesday, they must be open by law. They're closed, it's a violation. They're in violation of federal law. And there are a whole lot of legal penalties. Well, what legal laws are you violating by your facility being closed? Now, the bank has a fire. Those are extenuating circumstances, and yes, the penalties will be less severe, but they still must incur penalties. You will as well, unless you have some backup. Don't forget your security personnel. Don't forget your pre-plan. Remember, they established the criteria, what needs to be there, what major tasks you need to have done. Okay? When do we have to have those milestones done? And what are our expectations for that continuity plan? Okay? What is the success criteria for our continuity plan? In other words, what shows us that we are a successful group? Your essential functions, right? They are what vital services do you provide? And what really has to be done? exercise civil authority, as we saw, and maintain safety of the population, and keep your offices going. Your risk analysis, again, we've touched on this very, very quickly. What poses a real threat to the facility and the personnel, right? Frequency of occurrence, what things have happened in the past, what things could possibly happen in the future. Magnitude and intensity, how bad does it get? A fire in a facility, yes, can cause a whole lot of problems. Water can cause more, depending on what it is. Right? Possible spatial and extent due to duration, and the speed of onset. Those are some of the other things you need to take a look at. As far as your plans, orders of session, delegation of authority, and your concept or operations. Remember how your plan will be implemented, how it will be addressed, and how the emergency response group and the non-personnel will react. Okay? Writing the plan, who does it, the specifics, and what physical space needs to implement the plan itself. Okay? Understand that it needs to anticipate 30 days of usage, right? And may require longer. But remember, don't deal with every single eventuality that you think might or might not happen. And then remember that it should be straightforward and gathered and organized first before you try to write the plan. Get all of your details in order first, then go ahead and write the information down. Right? Test, test, test. Train, train, train. Right? Set up those times that things happen, and you will have a good exercise. With that, I'm going to pause, and we'll come back, and I'm going to change a little bit of direction to talk about planning on the business side.
Great. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. We will insert another guest speaker whose name is not marked, not fully